Hi guys, so today we're going to talk about my best books of 2024. How has my 2024 been? It's been fine. I actually feel like 2024 was a great year because it was very middle of the way. I don't think there were very many high highs, and I also don't think there were very many low in terms of reading. There weren't that many low lows. I think it was just a good, solid reading year for me. But I don't view that as a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. It's just another year of consistent reading, and I think to me that's okay. So I have got 10 books to talk about here, but I might not be jumping with joy, but these are all books that I really enjoyed and really stood out to me. Okay, so either way, they're still good books and I would recommend them. They're not going to be in any particular order, however, I will highlight ones that I'm like, no, I really love this one. So the first book I want to start with is In the Care of Magic by Robin Jo Margaret. So this is a cozy monster romance. But when I say romance, it doesn't actually follow a romance because one of the main characters is a romantic and also a gender. So maybe a better way to put it, and what is labelled on this book, is that this is a queer, cozy monster erotica. And that's basically because we follow the main character and she's a witch. And she's a witch that works in this human town. They don't really encounter any other magical creatures. So she's kind of by herself. This town has come to accept her, but mainly because of what she provides them. So because she's a witch, she can provide them with potions and tinctures. And so she has a little shop in a small town, but she starts to feel a bit used and a bit abused by them because they don't really care about her as an individual, as a person. They only care for what she can provide them. And so it gets to a point where she's like, I am burnt out. I need a break. So she closes down the shop and she retreats into a cottage that she has in the woods because she's a witch. Come on now. So she retreats to this cottage in the woods just to replenish. And as she replenishes, she comes across a book, I believe, a magic book, and in it there's a summoning where you can summon a sex demon. She's like, do you know what? Why not give it a whirl? Why not? She's like, that could be quite good for me actually. And so she does. And then it goes from there. Now, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this book is the themes that it has. Obviously, we are talking about monsters and witches and all sorts, but there are some real human themes going on here. So obviously, I love the queerness. I love the queer rep. In fact, the fact that it shows a queer platonic relationship. I think a lot of people struggle and they only imagine companionship with someone that, especially with someone that they're having sex with, as a romantic story. And I think this book was really good at pushing those boundaries and saying, do you know what, there are other relationships types that exist. And so it was really good to read about that and to read about this queer platonic relationship. I thought it was really good. Another thing that I loved was the idea of taking care, and replenishing the well, and the idea of burnout. And I think it is something that obviously a lot of people go through. They go through burnout, but it's not something that I usually see reflected in the romance books that I read. And really, to be fair, not a lot of books that I read. I think a lot of books that you read, the characters are very plucky. They really go with it. And this book challenges that and saying it's okay to take time to rest and to retreat and do what you need to do in order to build yourself back up again. And I really enjoyed that theme coming through. Another thing that I really enjoyed was that essentially the demon is a sex worker. And so it really touched upon themes of sex work and ethical sex work, which I really enjoy exploring ethical sex work in books and in real life, right? And it also helped break down some of the stereotypes towards sex workers in this book. And also to say, it's a job, and that's okay. So yeah, there are many things in this book that I think came together for me. I think, as I said about my reading, it was quite calm, and so I do think that I led more to cozy romances, and this was, I think, one of the leading ones. I think this is also a book that made me realize that I can get down with a monster romance. That made me happy. So following that, let's talk about another monster romance that I read. As I said, it started with a theme for me, and that is Yours Insatiably by Evita Weiss. I enjoyed it so much that I got a physical copy, and that's always a sign that I love a book, when I pick it up physically. Yours Insatiably follows our main character, and she is a succubus. So as in, she draws upon desire, human energy, I guess is the best way to put it. And this is a world that has both humans and monsters, and they do coexist as well. But obviously there is still a bit of a separation, and our main character, what's her name? Averin, she isn't really in touch with her monstrous side. She disguises the fact that she's a monster, she has a glamour, I think. I can't really remember, but yeah, basically she disguises it so the people at work, they don't know. And that's how she goes around her life. And so because she disguises it, it means that she kind of struggles in order to get what she needs to survive, in terms of to draw upon that human energy. So she does have a service, and it's a service that caters to monsters who, like, for whatever needs that they need, right? And so one day she calls upon this service after she's like really struggling at work and stuff. She calls upon this service and she meets the other main character, Pi. And it's great. She doesn't know, they use a code name until they turn up at her door, and then she realizes that her secret at work has come out, right? That she's a succubus. But they are like, you still need my help, and I'm still here to help you. So then they end up having like a one night stand basically together. And then it kind of goes from there. Obviously they work together, both of them. And Pi is a fae, but not like a fae, a court of thorns and roses. More, what do they call it? They're actually a death head hawk moth fae. Okay, so you kind of get more of a vibe there, right, in terms of just the naming of them. And so once that they found out that she's a monster as well, they take it upon themselves to try and introduce her to that more of her monstrous side, and it goes from there. And it's a bit of a slow burn with simmering feelings underneath. So I really enjoyed it. So this is again a monster romance, and as you can see, it has got similar themes that I enjoy in terms of discussing ethical sex work, but also it's got this sort of co-workers office romance feel, which is kind of interesting. And I think that when people think monster romances, they think that it all has to have like the same kind of theme, when it really doesn't. For example, the other one was like an isolated setting. This one is more of an office workplace romance, but yes, it is also a monster romance, which I really enjoy. I really enjoyed seeing the main character come into herself in terms of her monstrosity, and that's something else that again that has some real world themes in terms of like reckoning with your own identity, especially if you are someone of a marginalized identity, especially if you're, for example, if you're of a mixed of a dual heritage. I thought that was like really, really apparent, and you could see some of the correlations you could have with our main character coming to terms with her monstrosity there. And so I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I've got to say both of these books are really, really spicy. But I mean, for me, that's kind of beyond the point. That's not really why I love it. Yeah, so this is a female MB romance, monster romance, and I also really did enjoy it and would encourage you to pick it up. And also both of these books, like this book and In the Care of Magic, they are both by self-published authors, which I do love to support. So stepping away from the romance for a second, I want to talk about Whites on Race and Other Falsehoods. So yeah, this is basically an essay. You can see it's a very short, like pamphlet style book, and it's non-fiction, and it's written 2020 on reflection of George Floyd's murder and just the state of racial relations in the globe, but more of a Western perspective, more in the UK/US, I would say. For some reason, this has been on my radar since probably about 2020, but I think it was a bit too raw for me at the time to engage with this essay, and also I think I thought it was from a Canadian perspective. I'm not sure why, but also I think every time I saw the white and the red, it reinforced it in my head. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this is a Canadian author. So it didn't feel as prescient for me to read it as I think maybe if I knew it was someone who to me felt so similar to me. And that's why I loved it. I think that this book perfectly articulated some of the thoughts that I had in 2020 that I just don't think were, I didn't feel able to converse, to say, to talk about. I think that they felt unpopular opinions. They felt like difficult opinions mostly. And so when I read this book, it very much felt like someone was giving life to my thoughts, putting words to my thoughts and feelings. And I do think that I read it at the right time because, as I said, I think it would have been a bit too raw for me at the time. But yeah, it was just fantastic. I bought it, as I said, I think I read it about 3 times this year, which is just crazy. But that's because how much I loved it. Then moving on to the next book, which also touches on race relations, is Edge of Here by Kelechi Okorafor. So this is a short story collection, and it's called Edge of Here, as in this is stories that are in a spit's throw distance. Okay, so it's a bit sci-fi-y, but it's also supposed to be not so sci-fi that you can't see where it comes from today. It's like 5 years time, 10 years time, you know, that sort of nebulous in between, whereas a lot of sci-fi is like, okay, this is really, really the future. This is just the edge of here. This is in a future not so far away, not so far removed from us, and so therefore it's informed a lot by our current lives. And through this setting, the author manages to reflect a lot of the issues and problems that we have in our society in terms of a lot of this is to do with race in this book. But you know, also in terms of like feminism. There's loads of other themes throughout, but maybe that was a theme that spoke the most to me. So some really, really interesting concepts. As I said, this is a sci-fi short story collection, and there are some threads that carry through the short stories, which is my preferred method of short stories. I like when short stories communicate with each other or are informed by each other, so it really does feel like a collection in that way, not just random stories. You know, it does feel like they are one whole unit. It's very Black Mirror-esque. I think that's the best way to describe it. Like, if you enjoy Black Mirror, you will enjoy this, especially if in Black Mirror you want more of an exploration on what it's like to be a Black woman. I think that's where it is. It's very much focused on stories affecting Black women and Black people. So if that is something that you yearn for, then I would encourage you to pick this up. And, you know, for me, this also reflected how much I really can enjoy a short story collection. I think when I see some of the buzzy short story collections, or the ones that come to your brain immediately when you think short stories, isn't necessarily the short story collections that I enjoy. But I read quite a few this year, short story collections, and this was one of the better ones. One of the ones that engendered the most conversation, and one of the ones that made me think and mull over. And I think that's a sign of a good book, when it makes me think and laugh and then go and tell people, guys, I just read this book. Right, because a lot of people in my life aren't big readers, so they're not going to read it. So I'll go and I tell them, guys, this is the concept in the book, and we can have a whole discussion on it, almost like a book club with my loved ones, you know. And that's when I know that I found a good one. There's no real link between the last book and this book. In fact, this is a very insular experience. This is a very wholly me experience, I feel. And that's The Escape Room by L.D. Smithson. Talking about if you're a fan of Squid Games, you'll enjoy this. Okay, I know Squid Games is popular at the moment with the second season coming out, and also like the technology aspect of Squid Games. It's not just like a death game, but like there's a lot of technology used to pull it off, and I think that you could kind of see that in The Escape Room. So basically, the whole idea of that is that there's 8 strangers who have been told that they're going on a reality TV show, and this reality TV show it's just an elaborate escape room, right? So they've all signed up, and they're like, do you know what, I'm great at an escape room. Like me, I can murder an escape room personally. Do you know what I mean? They're like, me and escape rooms, listen, I would love to go on a reality TV show about it. And it's quite innocuous in that way. And so 8 strangers, they sign up, they make it through, and they go off to this remote island off the coast of the UK, of England specifically. However, all is not as it seems, and they will soon come to realise that, you know, it's a bit more sinister than they had signed up for. And I loved it. I thought that this book was a really good thriller in the way that it actually held the tension. For me, a thriller is supposed to be thrilling, and this book it really was. I do also heavily caveat the fact that the concept, the fear factor in an escape room is a bit of claustrophobia. Not claustrophobia, but the cousin of claustrophobia. It's on the screen here because I'm going to mess up the spelling. But it's basically a fear of being trapped. And that's kind of what the escape room kind of plays on. And that is like one of my biggest fears, the fear of being trapped. I don't have a fear of enclosed spaces or tight spaces, but I have a fear of being trapped. So when I say this book was really thrilling, I do acknowledge the fact that maybe it was so thrilling because of me and my enjoyment. However, I do think that this is just a well done thriller. Like, I do just think that it is quite good. I think that if you enjoyed The Passengers by, where is it? I do own it, but I can't see it right now. If you enjoyed The Passengers by John Mars, you'll enjoy this book. There's something about it that I think will have like a cross-pollination. And this book is nowhere near as big as The Passengers got by John Mars. But if it was up to me, I would say if you enjoyed The Passengers, you would enjoy this. Like, they are well done. They are quite similar. I also think because The Passengers kind of followed a group of people going through similar experiences, but then you kind of like zoom in and have a look at one character specifically and why they were chosen and their backstory. And that kind of is a similar vibe to what happens in The Escape Room. As you said, you know, you kind of have a look at all of the 8 contestants. So fantastic. Yeah, it's like one of the best thrillers I read this year. And then moving on to the best children's book that I read this year, we have My Shadow is Purple by Scott Stewart. Basically, we follow this person, this young child. I can't remember what their pronouns are, so I'm just gonna say they. So we follow this young child. Their dad's shadow is blue and their mom's shadow is pink, but their shadow doesn't feel like either of them, and it doesn't feel right to say their shadow's blue. And there are some aspects maybe, and then maybe there's other aspects of their shadow that feels pink tinged, but that doesn't feel right either. And oh gosh, guys, it's only a picture book, so it's only very short, but it is the most sweetest, cutest book about acceptance of people's different gender identifications. Is that the right way of explaining it? I don't think so. But basically about moving beyond the gender binary in a way that's accessible for kids. And not only just accessible, but also in a good way. Like accessible and helpful and really well done for kids. So I loved it. I think it's my favourite picture book that I've read since I'm an adult. And I do occasionally read a picture book. I personally am of the belief that there is something that I can enjoy in all age ranges. So I can read adult books, I can read YA books, I can read new adult, middle grade, and also children's picture books. You know, as I said, this is one of my favourite books of the year. This is one of the books that will stick by me the most of all of the books I've read that year, and it is a children's picture book. So if you have kids, would encourage you to pick it up for them. But also, if you have access to it from your library, just give it a quick read. Like, it will literally take you 5 minutes, and I promise you, it's just so wholesome. So would recommend. And my favourite YA for the year is None Shall Sleep, which is a bit of a rogue one. It's something that has been on my radar again since I think this was published in about 2022, but it was just percolating. There was no real need for me to pick it up immediately until it came available from my library, came in, and I picked it up, and I really enjoyed this, guy. So I really do enjoy YA thrillers, but this is just a really good YA thriller. So basically we follow these two teenagers, Emma and Travis. They have both been recruited by the FBI because of their unique skills, right? So it's very much Criminal Minds. If you like Criminal Minds, but Criminal Minds for YA, you'll like this. In fact, spoiler alert, because I am going to do if you like this book, read this book. But if you like The Naturals, you need to read this book. This book, to me, is better than The Naturals, and I read both of them in the same year. So, in fact, I read The Naturals. Again, The Naturals was on my radar, but after I read None Shall Sleep, it was like really pushed up the list. I'm kind of like reading my way through. The next one that I want to read is Teen Killers. You know, these YA FBI groups. I'm really enjoying that sort of theme at the moment, and this is the best one. So we follow these two, Emma and Travis. They've been recruited by the FBI because of their skills, and then obviously I think they're supposed to be working on cold cases at the start, but then they are tasked to help the FBI track down a serial killer who exclusively hunts teenagers. Oh, fantastic. Oh, so good. Oh, just like everything you want a YA thriller to be, you know? So it's like, if you enjoy YA thrillers, you will just enjoy it. It was just such a good, fun time. Very captivating. Like, I blasted through this. Like, once I picked it up, I could not put it down. Picked up the second one, and now I'm eagerly awaiting the third and final installment. The third and final installment comes out in February. So if you're like me and you're like, oh, I kind of want it all to be available, it will be come February. And I also love that it's concise. There's something about a trilogy, and maybe because I read a lot of adult books, but I don't know how many times I read trilogies. Either they're like series, because I do love a long series, don't get me wrong, I love a lengthy series, but there's just something comforting about a trilogy. I'll see how I feel after I finish the third one. It's very possible that I'll finish the third one and then be begging for more. That does often happen when I read shorter series. But absolutely. What I really enjoyed was the depth of character study. That's not the right word that I was looking for. Like the characters. The characters are really well done in terms of Emma and Travis. Like, you really feel like you get to know them and understand them in their complexities. Again, they feel complex. They don't feel two-dimensional in that way, which is really good. It also doesn't shy away from the thriller aspect, even though it's teens. It does kind of go there, which I think is enjoyable. But yeah, it's just really well done. It's just really well done. It does everything that it wants to do, and I think for me that's often all it takes for it to be a best book. Like, is it going to be the #1 best written, Booker Award winning, Pulitzer Award winning, Nobel Prize for Literature award winning book? No, but that was never the aim. And so I appreciate it for that. Another type of book that I find fascinating is books on sociopaths. So there was a book that I've wanted to read for a long time, and it's just never had an audiobook available in the UK. So I've never read it. I do also own this book here. the Confessions of a Sociopath. I eventually picked this up in a charity shop. That's how long I wanted to read this book. So when Sociopath, a memoir, came out, I was like, oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. That's everything that I want and need. And basically, this follows Patrick, and she is a sociopath. And so this is her life story. And whilst it's her life story, it's a memoir. So it is going to have something that ties it together. And that is the nature of being a sociopath, right? She does talk about the difference between psychopathy and sociopathy. I don't know how to say it. Basically, the difference between being a psychopath, a sociopath, and antisocial personality disorder. She kind of talks us through, because also she studied this. This has become a key cornerstone of her life. And I think she humanizes sociopathy a little bit, because I think it's a bit of a big monster bred demon in society. Like, oh yeah, you're a psychopath, you're a sociopath. And she's a bit like, yeah, I am. Yeah, I do have capacity for violence. Yes, I do, but like, this is my story, and I was really, really engaged. I think that's another thing that made me really enjoy this book. I was hooked, like from start to finish. I was hooked. It was just so captivating. Like, I just couldn't put it down, and I was just like eagerly consuming her story. The audiobook was super well done. Now, I have heard some people saying like, oh, how reliable is she, because she's telling her own story from her own lens. But I'm like, is that not everybody? I actually think that's a bit of a cop-out, because I think every memoir is obviously subjective. You're writing your own life story. Like, I don't expect it to be the most objective. Otherwise, I would read a science book. Do you know what I mean? I'd be reading the DSM. I don't want to. I want to hear you tell me your story. Also, I'm not here to doubt anybody's claims of their own. I think it's kind of odd to say, well, I don't think you're actually a sociopath, because I think, well, are you, right? People who are like, is she actually a sociopath? Or, it's all fabricated, blah, 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 blah. Really interrogating her. And I just think, are you a psychiatrist? Are you a psychiatrist? Because unless you're a psychiatrist, and not only are you a psychiatrist, unless you're a psychiatrist or a therapist, and you yourself have sat down and diagnosed her, I don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it. Sorry. How invalidating is that? If you were like, oh yeah, I'm autistic, and someone was like, and then you were telling your story of being autistic, or your life story, and then they go, no, I don't actually think you are. Sorry, you don't match up to what my beliefs of autism is. What the hell? Outside of her being a sociopath, I just enjoyed it as a memoir and as a narrative of someone's life story, and that's okay. Like, outside of all of that, I just enjoyed it. Like, it was just a compelling time. So, depending on where you stand on that kind of thing, you might enjoy it too. This book definitely has like a narcissist something. Like, maybe the therapist, psychiatrist who are watching and they're like, yes, I actually am. Yes, I actually am a psychiatrist, therapist. I need you to read this book and diagnose one of the main characters, because, oh boy, I think the best way for me to explain Before the Fact by Frances Iles is to read the opening, which is again what they've used as the tagline, because it's a really great opening to a book. It says, some women give birth to murderers, some go to bed with them, and some marry them. Lena had lived with her husband for nearly 8 years before she realised that she was married to a murderer. Basically, this book was first published in 1932, and it is recently, as in last year, it was republished by the British Library's crime book collection thing. The British Library have gone into their archives and they're pulling out some older crime works and they're republishing them. And this was one of them. And this one was so good. I really enjoyed it. And it really goes to show why they should do this and why this is a good idea. Because there are some great works of fiction that were published 70 odd, more than 90 odd years ago that would kind of just get forgotten and have been largely forgotten. So it's just bringing them back to life, bringing a new era of readers onto them. So this is a bit of a twist on a mystery book or a thriller book. It's a very interesting perspective. It doesn't follow the normal beats of a mystery or a thriller or a crime book. So basically it's all from the main character's perspective, and we follow her as she meets this man, and then she just basically goes through her life with this man, and it's very clear that this man is a murderer, but she doesn't know that when she first meets him. And so it's their whole story, and it is so gripping and compelling. And there's been a movie based off of it, Alfred Hitchcock's Suspicion. I haven't watched that, but I've read this book, and this book is so good. And it's one of the better thrillers that I've read all year. So it's like, yeah, just because it's published in 2024 doesn't mean that it's any better than this 1932 base book. So good, so good. Would really encourage it. As I said, it's unique, and sometimes I think for a book to stand out, sometimes that uniqueness really does help, because you're like, oh wow, like this is so different, like this is so interesting, this is something new. And so therefore it sticks out in your memory as being like, yeah, wow, what a book. So hence why Before the Fact is on this list. And then lastly, because I just feel like I've been chatting for so long now, we've got Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. And I've spoken about this again on my channel before. This is a romance book where we follow the main character who, her husband has passed away a couple of years ago. And she is deep in her grieving process. And her grieving feels so real to me, which is why I enjoyed it. So her grief feels very, very visceral and palpable, and messy in the way that grief is. She's still in the middle of her life, you know? So it's a bit like, I'm a widow, but at the same time, the love of my life is gone. And so she's got this contemptuous, is that the right word? I don't know, my English language today is really, really struggling. But she's got this, like, relationship. She's got this confrontational, that's the word, confrontational relationship with her husband's best friend. And because it's her husband's best friend, like, they've been in each other's circles for as long as she's known her husband, right? For years they've been circling each other, right? They've been together. And just because her husband's passed away doesn't mean that has stopped. Like, they're both grieving. He is also grieving the loss of his best friend. And I really enjoy the fact that it's like, yeah, he's lost someone too. And that we can see that best friend is also grieving. And they're still really involved with the husband's family, you know, just because he's passed away, they've all kind of rallied together. But their relationship, the two of them, is still very, very, still full of conflict, as it always has been. Until one day there's this, like, inciting incident where all of a sudden that relationship starts to change, and then we kind of watch how she views him starts to change and everything about it. It's just such a sweet romance, but it also has a depth of feeling. Obviously, I've spoken about the grief that is, like, very visceral. The love in here also feels very visceral. I think love in many a form, as in love and loss. We've got, gosh, this could be into, when I was talking about the different types of love, I just had a flashback to my English A-level, where it was like, yeah, you got to explore love in this. And then you're like, okay, well, you write a paragraph about love and loss. And then you write a paragraph about parental love. And then you write one about sibling love. And then you write one about platonic love. And then you write it about romantic love and romantic love after loss. But I could write all of that about this book. That's how much depth there is to this book in terms of the themes explored. It is so good. It's hefty, but every word felt necessary. It's about 500 pages, which some people were like, why 500 pages in a novel? But I think it really, really justified it, and it was so good. I mean, the rest of this series, technically this is book one of the series. Just read this and forget the rest. It does have some spice in it, but as I said, it's well-rounded. It's a well-rounded story, so it doesn't really leave much out. I loved it. And so that concludes the best books that I read this year. Apologies that I keep fiddling with my hair. I just can't help it. And yeah, what did you guys enjoy this year? I enjoyed all of these books, but I don't think that these are, like, best books of all time books. Do you understand? Like, they were good books for 2024. They're not like The Hunger Games. Okay, sorry to bring it up again. But it's not even like Girly Drinks. Like, Girly Drinks still felt like the best book of the year, even though I read it 2 years ago now. Do you know what I mean? Like, I spoke about Girly Drinks more than I spoke about any of the books that I read in 2024. So just one of them things though, innit? Like, I'm absolutely fine with that. So how was your reading year in 2024? And I'll see you for, like, some more roundup of the year bookish content. 25 and 31 has been paused. I will resume it after all of this. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.